I've had my TBR7 about 6 months now. We're up to 4,013 kilometers, which is pretty much 2,500 miles. 7 more miles and we'll be at 2,500. So I figured this was a good time for another review. So right now I'm just doing the oil change, and then once I fill it back up, we'll get into the 4,000 kilometer review. So here's a little tip I figured out. Now when you want to check your oil and unscrew this, it's a little tough. You can fit your hands in there. But if you just open your kickstart up like that, and then check it, much better. And while we're at it, for tips, I don't have a funnel that fits in the TBR7, so I do the water bottle trick. You cut the top off, and then you squeeze it down like that, put it in there. I don't know if I can do it one-handed. I'll set it up and then I'll show you. Did we put the, oh fuck, we didn't even put the drain plug back in. What are you doing? Oil's down to 40 bucks a barrel, you know, just use it to flush the system out. If you saw my last reviews, you might expect this to be a negative review, and it's not all bad. I just had to figure out the way that I was going to use the TBR7, and we've been having a lot of fun on it. So if you haven't watched my other TBR7 reviews and videos, I have a 1999 Yamaha XT225, so a lot of the times when I'm making the comparison between this Chinese bike and a name brand bike, I'm talking about my other Yamaha dual sport. The biggest disappointment for me was I feel like it's not a dual sport. I think it's too fragile for that. I don't take it in the woods at all anymore. I did at first when I got it just lightly, and I could tell that it wasn't really an off-road bike. So the only issue I think I've had with the TBR7 so far is when I first purchased it, I noticed the chain was very tight and the rear wheel was all the way forward. So there was no way to loosen the chain, and I knew it would never last like that long term. I think that's why a lot of guys are breaking the sprocket studs and having issues with the rear wheel. Just my opinion, but I think if you have a properly adjusted chain, you're probably not going to break your sprocket studs, unless you're out dumping the clutch trying to do wheelies. One thing I will say is I've been riding my TBR7 pretty gentle. I don't go full throttle too much. We don't really hit bumps too hard, very gentle on it. After I replaced the chain, the only other upgrades I made was I changed the rear sprocket to a smaller one, and the front sprocket to a larger one. So the front we went from a 15 to a 17, and in the rear we went from a 46 down to a 39. So our current setup is a 1739. We're still running the factory carburetor. I showed a video how you remove the float bowl from the bottom, and then you can change the main jet and get a little bit better performance out of that. You're definitely not going to see me dumping a bunch of money into it, upgrading stuff, putting an oil cooler on it, digital speedometer, stuff like that. I made a video showing why China bikes rust so fast, and I was saying how they rust because they didn't put enough paint on it. And the only thing I pointed out was right here. And I explained how they probably don't really focus on getting good coverage when they're spraying it. So looking at the foot peg over here, you see this little triangle brace? And then if you look inside there, there's more rust forming in there, so I'm pretty sure when I was looking online at the pictures to buy this bike, it had stainless rims on it anyways. But you can't always go by the pictures, and what you see in the pictures on the website doesn't mean that's what you're going to get. Some of them might not have disc brakes. One problem I had with mine was I purchased it from Q9 Power Sports, and I'll say right now, fuck Q9 Power Sports. My receipt says I paid for a 2020, and then I get it, and it says it's a 2019, and then I email them and talk to them about it. And they're like, oh no, that's just, you know, how they do it. It's just the way it's stamped on the bike. And then I get the title, and the title clearly says it's a 2019, so you can't register it as a 2020 if the title says it's a 2019. Not really that big of a deal because it came with all the things that I wanted. It has the skid plate, it has the rear disc brake. So I don't think the 2020 has anything that this particular Tao doesn't have. But there's still something wrong with that, because if I want to sell it right now online, I have to advertise it as a 2019. I can't sell it as a 2020 and then the guy gets here and give him a 2019. It only works like that if you're shipping bikes out. So even if you go through a professional agency like the Better Business Bureau, Q9 just says, fuck them, we're not going to respond. So I mentioned in my other video the exhaust was starting to rust up here. Even these little screws, those will rust. One thing I noticed is the front brake only grabs a very little bit of the surface, about half of it. And I don't think there's a way to adjust it. I could be wrong, but I think that's all she's got, because your pads are only so big, right? That's the size of the pad. Why would you need a brake rotor with all this space where my thumb is? It seems kind of silly. I've never changed brake pads on this bike, but I bet if you had a rear pad and a front pad, they're probably the same size. So your rear brake disc is perfectly fine. Looks like that's working great. The right size pads for the right size brake disc. But up front it just looks weird now because it's only grabbing on half of it. One little modification I did make was I took the lower skid plate off. I know some of these bikes don't have skid plates. I don't know why anybody's still buying Hawks that don't come with skid plates and handguards when you could get a TBR7 that has a skid plate and a handguard. I didn't really do too much research into it. What influenced my decision to buy the TBR7 was I already had other Tao Tao scooters. So that was the first Tao Tao I bought, the Tao Tao Thunder, and then when I saw Tao Tao made dual sports, it was like, oh, I'll try it out. I've had Tao Tao before. They're a pretty good brand. Again, I can only speak for my Tao Tao, but the motor feels very strong. Considering it's 95 pounds heavier than my Yamaha 225, and this is technically a 229cc, I think if they put this motor on a decent frame that's made out of lightweight metal and not this super thick tubing and so many cheap welded pieces, it'd be very strong, because it moves this bike almost as fast as the Yamaha, and it's a lot heavier. So the weak points that I would point out are the front forks. That's definitely a weak point. You can see that just grabbing the front brake and pushing the bike on the ground. You shouldn't see the forks moving. The swing arm is definitely another weak point. So I've done a couple little modifications that you might not even notice. Like back here at the rear plate, there's no reflectors sticking out, but I still have that little metal bracket there to put my plate to. So I just zipped those off. I think that makes it look a little bit better. So after I pulled those rear reflectors off, I came up here to the front and I removed this front one, and then I was looking at it, and I actually like it better with them on there. It sort of fills that gap nicely and brings it all together. So anywhere you see stickers on the bike are just to cover up scratches. Right here, little scratch. So perfection like that doesn't just happen. You have to look through a pile of stickers and then find the sticker that you want to use, and then stand here and look at the bike for 20 minutes, and then finally it happens. As far as consumable maintenance, the only thing that's really worn out is the chain guide. So I made my own here out of a mud flap, and it's working out pretty good. I've got 1,000 kilometers on this. It just wears a nice little groove in there. So it works just like your regular chain guide. It's perfectly fine. So I do enjoy riding it on the street. I've been putting some miles on, taking it on some pretty long rides. I'm disappointed in it as a dual sport, but I'm happy with it as a heavy duty scooter. So I've been struggling with my video editing process, so a couple videos might get double uploaded, but I think I got it figured out now. So check out all my other TBR7 videos for some pretty cool stuff, and subscribe for more, because I'll probably do some more TBR7 adventures before winter comes.